The MAGA movement is a direct result of American sadomasochism, a cultural tradition which was present even at the very birth of the nation and is rooted in Judeo-Christian ideology. From a philosophical and not a theological standpoint, the God of the Old Testament is a cruel, sadistic, but ultimately just God. We see examples of this God's sadism in God's flooding of the earth, in Abraham's near sacrifice of his son Isaac, and in the plagues and punishments. The story of Job is a perfect illustration of sadomasochism. God permits Satan to torment Job merely to win a bet. Job's family and life are destroyed. God asserts his power, not his compassion. He eventually rewards Job for his faithfulness with a new family and a new life, but that does not compensate for what has been lost. Job is the masochist who never curses God, but submits. He repents despite having done nothing wrong. His surrender to God's will is a conditioned acceptance of abuse. Given the European history of Judeo-Christian tradition, it should not then be surprising that the European settlers who established the United States brought with them this ideology of sadomasochism. The foundations of the United States were laid upon chattel slavery and genocide of the indigenous population. From the very beginning, sadism was an integral component of the American ethos. Later, the United States exported sadism via imperialism in the name of democracy. Cold War interventions, torture, psychological operations, proxy wars. These form a pattern of righteous violence paired with self-victimization. This was carried forward into the modern era with mass incarceration, endless military interventions, and an ever-increasing military budget. Americans take pleasure in domination and find meaning in suffering. Masochism, too, has been present from the very inception of the nation. Calvinist Puritan traditions cultivated this mindset. The Puritan worldview emphasized suffering, denial, and guilt. Discipline through pain informed the Protestant work ethic. We built a national mythology which glorified suffering. Revolution, Civil War, Great Depression, 9/11. Pain was reinterpreted as purification, as something that unites or ennobles the nation. The MAGA movement and Donald Trump represent a continuation of the long tradition of American sadomasochism. The president's sadism is not clinical or diagnostic, but is readily observable through his delight in dominating, humiliating, or punishing others, particularly the vulnerable. His masochistic MAGA base has a psychological need for order, simplicity, and belonging. This mimics fundamentalist faith systems where suffering is seen as virtue. Trump is seen as the cruel but ultimately just God. If suffering is the will of God, it must be righteous. It is not for us to understand the will of God. Cruelty and submission are fundamental to MAGA. In fact, cruelty is a form of communion, a service which glorifies pain, dominance, humiliation, and tribal purity. The MAGA movement will not be easily defeated, even when its leader meets the same end which ultimately all of us do. There will be denial and conspiracy theories. Even in life, the president has been elevated to the level of one who has been anointed by God. In the afterlife, some clever and charismatic charlatan may make claim to being able to communicate across the divide and thereby consolidate some level of the movement's power. To be clear, American sadomasochism is not a legacy of all Americans. It is specifically a legacy of those who share European heritage. And it lies with us to recognize this sadism, this masochism, has been with us for 249 years. And it is our responsibility to put an end to it. It was white European immigrants who built this foundation of cruelty and submission. And that is why it is on us to tear it down.